This is Food for Thought with Deborah Walker. Today on Food for Thought, I have Dr Guy Meadows with me, who's a sleep psychologist with a doctorate from Imperial College in London. He's been working in sleep for about the past 12 years, 8 of which have been purely dedicated to clients overcoming insomnia. And he's actually recently set up the Sleep School, which definitely caught my eye, considering a number of my clients suffer from lack of sleep. He spent about the last 4.5 years working within sleep research laboratories in Royal Brompton and Charing Cross hospitals, which are both in the UK. And his PhD investigated sleep in normal individuals and patients with sleep apnea. So it's great to have you on the show, Guy.
Thank you. Welcome. It's great to be here.
Now, I think from my experience in clinic that sleep's become a casualty of modern living. And it's almost something that people do because they have to, not because they realise it's good for their health. And I just think it's now getting in the way of doing something more interesting.
I think you're exactly right. And one of my key messages these days is about just trying to make sleep a priority again. It's an essential part of our life that we can't do without, and yet it's been pushed out by our increasing work demands and sort of social lives as well.
And it is really interesting when you say the priority has truly changed over the last few years, and we have forgotten the fact that it is absolutely essential.
I think one thing which really highlights this, which I've been sort of using as my reference point recently, is my gran had her 94th birthday a couple of months ago, which is a great achievement in its own right, and she's a normal sleeper by all accounts, and that means that over 31 years of her life have been spent sleeping. Now, that tells us that sleep is not some sort of evolutionary mistake. It's a biological necessity that's fundamental to our sort of everyday health, well-being, performance. So, yeah, it's got to be made a priority again.
And Dr. Alan McShaffen, basically, who pioneers sleep research at the University of Chicago, supports what you say there, because he says if sleep does not serve an absolute vital function, then it's the biggest mistake the evolutionary process ever made, which just makes me laugh, I have to say. It's so crackingly on the mark, isn't it?
It is, and yet, I mean, sleep is one of those funny things where it makes up, sort of a huge part of our everyday life, and yet, in general, we take it completely for granted. But even in the sleep research world, it hasn't really had that much attention until recently. In sort of as recent as the sort of the 1950s, we still perceived sleep to be a relatively non-phase, not really doing much. When, as we're going to sort of hopefully move on to discuss, we realise that actually it's hugely important for, helping our everyday health and well-being.
And we've just gone through, well, not so long ago, daylight saving time, and actually, even when I was reading about that, it doesn't attach the importance to it in regards to the impacts it has on the sleeping. Yet the health and safety executive and other safety executives across the world know that afterwards it actually has a massive impact, sleep. And so it's astonishing that actually we don't attach the importance to it when they know that it affects work performance because it causes more accidents. The daylight saving time. It's actually a direct correlation there, isn't there?
Yeah, I mean, there's some great data or some horrifying data, whichever way you look at it. We know that the rate of traffic accidents increases by 20% for 5 days after the lost hour as we move into to daylight saving. We know that, from a medical perspective, we know that there's a 5% increase in the risk of heart attacks 3 weeks after sort of the lost hour. So, and that just comes us, brings us to really the, how sleep is regulated, that internal clock of ours, and how sensitive to it, to change it is, and how we sort of, we wield it so with so much lack of care. Really, we don't recognise that actually it's what makes us feel the way we feel, the way we want to eat when we do, the way we exercise at the best time during the day. It pretty much regulates everything about our lives.
And that's actually what is truly fascinating about sleep, isn't it? Because research has shown, as they've kind of progressed through and they've highlighted different areas of the body, fundamentally it affects absolutely everything, and even and every chronic disease state is impacted by it, isn't it?
That's right. I mean, and I guess in a way you don't really need to be a rocket scientist to realise that. Anything which we spend a third of our lives doing, it's probably going to be pretty influential. And yet it's taken the time for us to realise, well, hang on a second, it does seem to, affect our ability to regulate, our mood. It is important in maintaining a healthy weight. It does seem to keep us, physically healthy. It is good for cognitive performance, creativity, and so we're a little bit sort of slow off the mark, but we are getting there and realizing actually this is pretty important stuff, and we should be getting more of it.
Definitely. And the interesting thing for me also is that it actually changes gene expression as well, which fundamentally is obviously really important. Not, most people talk around gene expression around cancer, don't they?
Exactly. This is where a lot of certainly the mice research which is coming out is showing the level at which sleep is the processing that goes on during sleep is occurring, and it's ultimately what we know is that without it we can't survive, and now sleep deprivation is such on the agenda of the world in which we're living in. That seems to be critical or playing a crucial role in so many health concerns. Hence the reason why pretty much every weekend you'll open another sort of weekend paper and there'll be another article on sort of how we're not getting enough and the impact that's having on our body, and the wide-ranging medical concerns. And so a lot of people read those and suddenly will easily be able to connect with, sort of what's going on in the health of their life and, and perhaps how their sleep is.
Do you think most people are chronically deprived of sleep now?
That's a really interesting question, because if we look at the statistics, we know that 30% of the UK suffer from chronic insomnia. But more concerning is 20% of the global population are. So it's a huge figure.
Wow.
But I would hope that I would say that to say we're chronically sleep deprived, the majority is. I don't think we're quite at that state, thankfully, yet, but I'd say we're pretty close. What is happening is certainly, whilst it may not be chronic, the levels of tiredness are going up, and there's things like semi-insomnia, which is sort of like a halfway house of insomnia in a way, which is because people are just going to bed a little bit later or they're getting up a little bit earlier. They're just not feeling refreshed. That their sleep hygiene, sort of their general lifestyles are not as good as they could be, and so their sleep's just been disturbed a little bit. And so, whilst that's not chronic sleep deprivation, it's sort of it's mild. So yes, we're all a little bit sleep deprived, but a large percentage are chronically.
What's the body exactly doing when it goes to sleep? Because, so many of us do think it's kind of unproductive time. Allow us to realise what is actually happening within our body that makes it so important.
Okay, so I think the most obvious, which we all recognize sleep to be, is its recovering energy. But interestingly, the research has actually shown that the amount of energy recovered from during is actually very little. So it doesn't seem to be one of the primary roles at all. But there is that sort of you wake up feeling more rested. But that can be attributed to lots of other processes. So, one which is in the media a lot at the moment is that it helps to regulate our appetite and helps us to maintain a healthy weight. And therefore, sleep deprivation is now linked to being overweight and obese. And this is because of its role in regulating the hormones that control appetite, leptin and ghrelin. And I'm sure you've noticed if you've ever had a poor night, you can wake up feeling really, sort of hungry in the day. Other things, it's vital for regulating insulin, obviously the hormone that regulates the levels of glucose in our bloodstream, and so it's now shown to be important in managing our risk of diabetes. We all sort of understand that it's also for repairing us and growing us in a way. And, one which is sort of will connect with is when we're feeling tired or, sleep deprived, run down, well, then our immune system may be a little bit more suppressed. And sleep is shown to be vital for maintaining our immune system. And on a more sort of the extreme end of that, it shows that it's actually important for not only warding off coughs and colds, but also helping to reduce our risk of developing certain cancers. Again, something else which we all know about, it's in our everyday language. We have that wonderful, looks like he or she got out of bed the wrong side this morning. And this shows the intimate link for generations that if someone's had a poor night, they're generally going to be a bit grumpy in the morning. And that's simply because sleep is vital for regulating our emotions and managing our... And we know that actually tiredness also inhibits the part of our brain that helps us to moderate our emotions in the day. So it's playing a crucial role there as well. But it's also been shown to be important in our physical health, protecting the health of our hearts, our brain, so reducing the risks of heart attacks, strokes, high blood pressure. Sleep is doing things. It's such an active process. It's where there's your body is busily mending, repairing, and actually another one which I've forgotten to mention is memory processing. It helps to... It lays down all of the memories that we experience. And not only that, it ciphers them. It says, well, that one isn't very... It gets rid of it, but it says, well, that was a pretty key thing, so I'll put that to the top of the pile. And then some of the most exciting knowledge. If there are people who perhaps their job entails being creative, then if there's a reason to sleep, it should be to enhance that creative processing or just the ability to problem solve. We all know, again, another phrase from our heritage is sleep on it. Identifying this obvious link that you have a problem before you go to bed, and there's the answer. There's the answer because we now know that when you're asleep, your brain is able to access of your experience, which it can't do during wakeful consciousness. It's like because you've stopped all of the other processes in the body whilst you're sleeping, it's got time to sort of to dive into the depths of our experience. And ever since you fell off your bike when you were 12 or something, you never know it. That might hold the key to solving this problem that you're facing, in the world today. So that's just a snippet of why people should respect, appreciate, and really value a good night's sleep.
I love the word respect around it, because I do think that we do have to respect the fact that it is so important. Now, employers should be really all over this like a rash, from my perspective. And I used to work in HR, and when I consider the fact that you've said to me that 20% of the global population are potentially suffering from a level of insomnia, and actually that is going to affect as many things as you're talking about, but also reaction times, cognition and emotions, all things that truly matter within any environment where there's a number of people working or being together, because it's going to either reduce productivity or make life very much more difficult to actually work together collectively, isn't it?
Exactly. Like you said, it's a bit of a sort of a non-brainer, when it comes to sort of corporate or business performance. There are so many roles within our working lives which sleep are necessary for helping us to achieve. Or to work at our optimum, and we know. I forget exactly what the figure is, but it's in the billions of pounds in lost productivity to UK business. I think the figure in the US is actually closer to your 70 billion is lost as a direct result of the 60 to 70 billion in lost profit as a result of lost productivity of sleep loss. So it's hugely influential, and hence the reason why the bigger organizations, the Googles, etc. out there are putting sleep. They have designated sleep pods where people can go to recharge. And only few months ago, I did a little piece for a bit of TV work where we went into a trading house in the city, and we took half the traders and allowed them to have a 20-minute nap, and with the other half the traders and they basically had to keep working, and we performed cognitive on them, sort of psychomotor tests, looking at their sort of reaction time, ability to do maths, etc. And what was brilliant is that the people who had their 20-minute nap outstripped the non-nappers every time. And it's albeit it was done in a very small. So wasn't sort of at the correct power to be sort of way in statistically significant, but there is so much research which shows that even just a 20-minute power nap can be hugely advantageous within the corporate setting.
And it has quite big implications for night shift workers, doesn't it? And people who are constantly changing time zones.
Exactly. I mean, this is shift work. I mean, interestingly, shift work. We sort of perceive shift work as maybe some sort of person who might work in a large scale industry. But shift work actually can range from someone who is literally just it's ultimately any work which is constantly chopping and changing the circadian cycle, so the 24-hour cycle that we have. So that might be someone who jumps on a plane all the time. It might be a trader it might be a trader in the UK whose designated job is working on the Japanese or the US markets, or it could be someone working in a call center, sort of who's working sort of different hours, whether they be earlys, lates, or nights. We now know that because of the sensitivity of that clock of ours, shift work can be particularly poor for our health, and there's lots of data to back that up.
I actually saw my father's behaviour change when he did night shift. He did night shift, as many workers did at the end of their kind of working life with the company he worked with, because they got a better pension if they did about 3 years of night shift, because the pension would end on their final salary. And I saw him change behaviourally and emotionally during that time. And it was, in hindsight, I can see why. But at the time, we knew it was because he was doing the nights. And lots of them knew that their behaviour changed. So it's almost like a wisdom that we have, but we almost don't apply it to what we're doing in regards to changing our sleeping patterns.
We are ultimately, we are creatures who have evolved to live on a planet that is constantly rotating between sort of periods of light and dark, or cycling between periods of light and dark. And so we have evolved to work or to be, active during the day and to sleep at night. And for the vast majority of us, turning that on its head results in sort of many physiological, emotional, sort of mental, physical effects. What was interesting there is I said the vast majority, because we have to recognize that everyone is completely unique and individual, and it's quite dangerous to say that everyone should go to bed and get up at this time. Yeah. Or should eat at this time even, or should exercise at this time, because everyone's clock is individual, and we know that there are short and there are long sleepers, and there are early and there are late sleepers. And so, what would be really great is before someone does shift work, is to perhaps screen them to see whether they're physiologically programmed, physiologically better off to do it, because you want the night owls doing the shift work. You want the night owls doing the night shifts, and the larks doing the earlies, and then everyone, not only would their physical and mental health be better, but also the performance would be better as well.
I see a whole new arena of psychological testing starting in the HR departments.
Well, I actually think this is. I know this is the way things are going to head. I mean, it will probably take quite a while to filter through to sort of the HR departments, albeit the largest complaint reported to HR. Hence the reason why lots of companies come to see me at the sleep school is poor sleep. So they're fully aware of the issue. But if we take something like sort of medication, there's a lot of research going into chronopharmacology, where interested in the timely release of medication in related to the body clock, because they may have created a drug, but it's not effective. But actually, it's not effective not because of it's an ineffective drug. It was just it's been delivered at the wrong time, and so and this goes. It doesn't matter what you're putting in, whether it be sort of a herbal remedy or just a decent meal. If it's delivered at the wrong time, i.e. eating in the middle of the night for most people, it's the absorption process, the way the nutrients up, etc., the benefit that you get from it is completely different to if it's taken at the appropriate time for it.
I find that really fascinating, to be honest, because I see that dietary changes sometimes can be, by me shifting them either backwards or forwards within a certain time scale, and actually the person's health can just change overnight because of it. So it is a fascinating area to start to kind of look into when you do look at the person and tailoring it far, far more to what is right for their body clock.
It sort of throws a huge spanner in the works, unfortunately. But as we progress, we're going to understand more and more about this, and that's what's going to be truly exciting about providing, really specific individual health information.
Yeah, individualized healthcare is the way it has to go, isn't it? Because industrialized medicine isn't particularly working in many respects. Now, I know that sleeping's obviously really important because Man United, who are one of my favourite teams, my favourite football teams, actually monitoring the one of their star players, Wayne Rooney. It's because of his sleeping and he's having children and the impact that they're having, and they're monitoring the demands that the sleep deprivation, or the children are having, and the sleep deprivation is actually having because of it. Now, if they're doing it, all of a sudden you can see that it is a wider issue, but I'm having a laugh about Man United and Wayne Rooney, but seriously, sleep deprivation is a big issue for new parents, isn't it?
It is. It's a huge issue, and it's an issue close to my heart. I have two children of 4 and 2. I would say that I'm now clear of the major sleeplessness period, but for consistent 3 years sort of thing, I have slept a lot less than I've ever slept before, because of the needs which young children need during the night, whether that be sort of nighttime feeding, or just they have coughs and colds, or just training them to sleep. And so, it's at the sleep school, we see an awful lot of new parents, especially new mums, where their insomnia started as a product of having to get up to feed. And then a phrase that I hear a lot is, my baby now sleeps through the night and I can't, because the baby's has learnt the skill, but the mother's body clock, internal clock, is still waking her up to feed. And if there is an ounce of anxiety at that point thrown in, sort of, if I don't fall back to sleep soon, how will I cope tomorrow? Suddenly that amplifies wakefulness even further, and leads to further sleep loss and insomnia. So it is yes, you're right. It's a really key area that again needs test.
And you've had the anxiety around sleeping yourself. I read at the beginning of your book, you jokingly say, what if as a researcher I become an insomniac, and then effectively the worry actually starts to almost create that, doesn't it?
Well, I mean, that's what insomnia is. It's insomnia is the worry about not sleeping, and imagine the situation. I'm spending sort of 8 hours, maybe more a day, talking to people who can't sleep. It was inevitable fact that the thought would pop into my head: what if you don't sleep? and that's what really led to me pioneering my approach to insomnia. Uses acceptance and commitment therapy, because I realized that the more I tried to battle to get rid of, to change the thoughts, what if I don't sleep? Actually, the more it stuck around, the more it hung around, the more it brought in its friends as well, and they had a bit of a party in my head. And only by sort of bringing in a certain level of acceptance, using tools such as mindfulness, was I able to realize I didn't need to do anything with it. I could just let it go, and that's where my sort of catchphrase was coined. Normal sleeper, what they do to sleep, they'll tell you they do nothing. But if you ask an insomniac, they'll give you a list as long as their arm.
Yeah.
Just simply because when you suffer from desperate, and as humans we like to be in control, and so we try and do so much, but we put effort in and yet get very little in return.
And it is interesting that you do refer to the rituals that people go through, and I know this from my own clients. They will have a list as long as their arm about the things that they're doing to enable themselves to sleep, and what's stopping them is the thinking about all of this stuff, and the attempt that their mind is now, it's almost like this big fight in their mind to get themselves asleep. And it is it's fascinating what you were talking about in the book in regards to the mindfulness side. It's almost retraining the mind to be quiet.
It's re-educating the brain that it doesn't need to be you used a great word there. I think it was fight or battle. So many of my clients describe going to sleep or going to bed like going into battle. And I always say you never hear anyone hear anyone fall asleep whilst going into battle. It just wouldn't happen, or you never hear anyone fall asleep whilst running away. It wouldn't have been towards our evolutionary advantage. And that's what it's like when you have insomnia as a conditioned response. When it's become learned, it's you as you move towards the bedroom, you're all waking up. Your brain is thinking, oh crumbs, there's going to be we're going to move into something fearful here. We need to be on red alert, and we need to wake them up even more. And so, but the more you fight against that, the more awake you become, and you sort of get caught in the vicious cycle.
And we're doing this to our youth as well, though, aren't we? We talked about the parents and the parental side of things, but actually our youth, the Journal of Pediatrics shows that our children are getting less and less sleep, and it's actually affecting their behaviours and mental cognition, all those things we've previously talked about, more and more.
I think this is actually one of the most worrying areas when we consider. If I consider how I was sort of the world in which I was brought up in, I was very often sort of, I would say, bored, but not by any fault of my parents, just because that was a state which was commonly allowed. There wasn't sort of TV. TV was there, but it was very limited, and there certainly weren't any sort of computers or mobile phones or things like that. Life was a lot slower. If you were playing, you were generally playing with your hands. You were playing outside. You were. It was a lot more. It was more mindful, but. Unfortunately, these days, sort of our children are actually going to have to learn how to be bored, learn how to slow down, because they're all speeding so much. And the side effect of this is that the rates of sleeplessness in children are going up hugely. But not only that, as you pointed out, the actual amount of sleep that children are getting is huge. It's much less, and we know that actually children now, compared to 30 years ago, are getting a whole hour less sleep than they were, and an hour is huge amounts when it comes to cognitive performance. There's a group in Israel which did some lovely research where they allowed where they got a group of, I think it was 9-year-olds, and they reduced half the group their sleep by an hour, and they increased the other half of their sleep by an hour. And what they found is that the people the group who were sleep deprived, their cognitive ability decreased by 2 whole years. So basically, it was 5 days of sleeping for 1 hour less, put them at a level equivalent to 2 years below in their schooling. And that's just 5 days, let alone what we see today in everyday life.
I'm absolutely lost for words about that, to be honest. I know that you can hear that I'm lost for words, actually. About how serious that is after 5 days, yeah.
And it's not, again, it's not surprising, since we're understanding about how the regulation of our body clock is so sensitive. But sleep is so necessary for children. The real issue that we're seeing in young children is that they're being allowed to just stay up later. They're spending more time on computers, sort of things which stimulate light. And so just the total amount of sleep is being greatly restricted, and huge consequences on their not only their physical but their mental development. And there's a lot of research which shows that as a product, it's causing hyperactivity. They certainly have problems in their just general conduct. and just right down to just simple things like, having tantrums. Everything's worth really exciting is that when research, when those factors, when the children have been sleep more, those factors have improved. And so there's a lot of research to suggest that actually a lot of people who've been lazy, attention deficit disorder, hyperactivity, etc., actually all they need, all they could potentially need would be just to get a bit extra sleep.
The developmental issues are really scary, aren't they? Because, of course, from my perspective, you can't catch up on the sleep that you've lost. Is that correct?
Not. No.
Okay, right.
We can't repay a sleep debt, as it's called. So, the common behaviour is that, pretty much the majority of the UK, or, sort of certainly to any other population, is we will sleep deprive ourselves during the week while we work. We'll still maybe get 6 hours or less. And then on the weekends, we'll try and catch up. So we'll sleep for, 10 or 12. But the problem with that is it affects the quality of your sleep, and it has effect to the quality of your sleep for the coming week. So all you need regular good quality sleep. Yes, you can't repay it.
So in effect, if you're saying to me that 1 hour less after 5 days for children can have such a detrimental effect, we're truly holding the development of our children back if we are not enabling their sleep.
Exactly. Sleep. The reason why I say we need to make sleep a priority. Moment, there's such a big focus on what children should eat, and of course that's absolutely fundamental. The foundations of health. And there's also a big focus on how children should move, because again, it's fundamental. But there's this other one which we seem to have we didn't really realize for some reason, which is sleep, third pillar of health, which is intimately linked. We know that, if you're not sleeping, well then is likely to be worse, and you're probably going to do less exercise. They're all and so we just need to ensure that they're all being done, to an optimum. But I think sleep is the one that needs a bit of praise and awareness right now.
Now, even in the Daily Mail, and you talked about the newspapers, every single weekend there's something in them. Daily Mail is one of our UK newspapers. It's showing, you were talking about television, but all the different gadgets. Our children and ourselves are just inundated with gadgets that are downloading information to us constantly, keeping our minds busy right into really late. How late do you want to stay up? Basically there's enough information on the internet now to keep you awake for the rest of your life in many respects. But they're showing, that this piece of research that was in the Daily Mail showed that just the phone was causing sleeping problems, and now we've got tablets. You've got your laptops, you've got your games. It is.
Yeah.
Wow. How do you manage all of this? Not just in children, but yourself? Because even I know that if I get into a good book at night on my Kindle, then I may as well say good night to the night.
It is. You are right. I think there are a couple of points I want to pick up on there. Firstly, we've got to understand that mobile phones, all of these devices are affected in a number of ways. The one you sort of touched on there was the obvious one, is that it's just maintaining of cognitive activity. They stimulate our brain, and so you could say that the sort of the time between the distinction between day and night has become blurred. Obvious sort of downing of tools, sort of as used to be, and then obviously pre-industrial revolution, pre the arrival of streetlights, etc. We were pretty limited. It got dark. We had to sort of stop working. Our activity generally went down. But with the rise of continuous 24-hour light and these, we can keep going, and our brains are just processing, and that sort of we know that, children who watch TV right up to going to sleep, well, that has a knock-on effect to the quality of their sleep. It lessens the quality. But elevated brain activity, but also because of the light. So the light that's emitted, we've got into this really bad habit where we all get into bed, or a lot of us get into bed, and the last thing we do is we put a small screen right next to our eyes. Now, our eyes have light-sensitive cells in them, and they're responsible for keeping this fundamental internal clock on time. Now, the problem with that light, which is coming from tablets and phones, is that it's identical to the is up in the sky. That's the reason why the sky is blue, is because it's blue light, and the reason the light that comes out of the phones is blue light. They're pretty much the same wave. And so you're by holding that phone or tablet in that position, you're effectively informed, oh, hang on a second, I don't think it is nighttime. I think it's still daytime. Let's inhibit release of melatonin, hormone that should be being released, and let's just keep cortisol going. So it's confusing everything. It's delaying this process that we've evolved to do for millions of years. And so it's crucial that we get those, so that we find ways in which to perhaps alter that light. But ultimately, you said, what can we do? From an education perspective, it's about providing adults with education so they understand the impact that these devices can be having, and then for them to educate their children so the habits become in place. So, for example, I will wind down about 40 minutes before going to bed. I will close any devices, switch off any electrical stuff. I will dim the lights, just to tell my brain that sleep is on its way. So it doesn't have to be down from 6 p.m. It's just, having 40, 50 minutes is enough just to sort of help us to sleep.
And it's not just all the devices though now, it's our diets as well, isn't it? Caffeine usage is huge, and of course most people don't realise that many of the soft drinks they drink have got caffeine in them, and the body takes a period of time to actually allow that to actually process through it, and so it can be keeping people awake at night as well, can't it?
Exactly. Our diet is again another one of those factors which is stimulant. Insomnia is called a hyperarousal syndrome. We're being hyperaroused, and so light is one source, and the cognitive act describing is another source, but also sugar, caffeine, all of these things are just yet more arousing us. And more they're being sort of sneaked in to the sort of the mainstream diet in a way which we often wouldn't realize. And so there are lots of foods, even foods for children, which have high levels of sugar in, which really shouldn't have. Obviously because they make them taste nicer, but actually what they're doing is they're just sort of they're eating us and pushing sleep away. My sort of only reservation with the comments before everyone goes and cuts everything out is as you will have read from my a lot of people who come to see me, they've cut everything out in this rather obsessive way. They'll go, right, I need to control my sleep, so I won't drink any caffeine, I won't drink any alcohol, I'm going to run a marathon, etc. But I actually find that cutting out, if you like having a morning coffee, cutting that out can be as harsh as drinking too much, because often what happens is resentment that breeds around not being able to live your life actually drives them to struggle more against sleep. And so it's about education and balance. Yes, sort of having a coffee 9 a.m, sort of with your if you enjoy it, then that's great, have it. But then I will sort of knock these things on the head, the stimulant type things on the head, from about sort of midday onwards, just to allow them to get out of the system.
And it is, as you were saying previously, it is all about tailoring it right for you, and it's not just about what you eat and drink, it's also what you think. So what I was going to say was, so what is good quality sleep from your perspective as a researcher?
And that's a really, question, because again, we're told, if you open the paper, that you're getting sort of 8 hours, otherwise X, Y, and Z will happen. But again, that's quite a dangerous statement, because the average is 7 to 8 hours, but the range is 4 to 10. Some people are short sleepers, some people are long, some people are early, and some people are late. So a good way to sort of assess how much sleep you need is ultimately you need enough sleep to wake up feeling refreshed and able to cope and get on with your day. And so, because I've had people who are sleeping 6 hours and feeling refreshed and coping, but they've read that they're meant to be getting 8, and so when actually their individual need is likely not to be 8, it's likely to be slightly less. And certainly I'm on the shorter end of the spectrum. I need about 6.5 hours to feel functioning, whereas my wife is on the longer end. She's sort of 8 to 9 hours. So it's individual needs.
Oh, and what is it with teenagers needing nearly 20?
Well, teenagers again are a really interesting part in sleep development, because we know that as we go through puberty, we experience what we call a delayed sleep phase. So this is where the release of the sleep-promoting hormone melatonin is delayed. And so whereas, and it can be delayed by 1 hour to 2 hours, this explains why children by teenagers specifically, want to go to bed later and get up later. And they're physiologically sort of affected by this process. So this explains why so many groups in the US and now in the UK are beginning to lobby the governments to get schools for sort of A-level, for teenage years to start later, because there's no point giving a child, a teenager, a maths class at 8 a.m. because effectively that's equivalent to their midnight. They're still asleep and they won't learn anything. So it's about tailoring it to the individual and understanding the physiology to enable us all to perform and be at our best.
Yeah, and I do think that work doesn't enable that at times, because I know that when I stopped working and started to work for myself, my own clinic time actually only starts from 11 o'clock, and that's when I know that I've got the time to kind of come round and get my body in order, my head in order, and by 11 o'clock I'm right on it, as I say. But actually before that, I don't do well. If I have not slept well, I need the extra time, and that allows me by being self-employed. Whereas when I was working, I had to be up at 6, if not before 6, to get to work. I really didn't function very well from 3 o'clock onwards.
It brings this. We have so many quotes in our in our language. Actually, the language. Yeah. The world, which all refer to around this concept of the early bird catches the worm. In Italy, it's got something to do. They collect the early gatherer collects mushrooms, or it's referenced throughout the world, but all of them reference the fact that getting is better. But actually, we now know that that's not sort of goes against sort of the individual's needs. And like you said, for yourself, sort of being sort of a late person, getting up actually was unhelpful. You wouldn't be working at your best. And the great thing about the modern world is that whereas in the olden days, selling clearly you would have benefited, if you could pick them first and you're going to be first at the market. But the reality, we do sort of live, so an advantage of the sort of 24-hour world that we live in is that we can adapt it to the variation of human that is human sleep. So that for yourself, you can get up a bit later and be at your best at 11, whereas I'm ready to go at 8.
Yeah. Now, sleep therapies can range from simply learning new lifestyle behaviours to promote your own sleep, to figuring out how to position yourself in bed, can't they? So can you outline a few things that people can do to now get a better night's sleep, Guy?
Sure. I think the first thing, which you were sort of just touching on there, is the general concept of style and bedroom environment. And again, I don't want people to obsess about this. Ensure that you're covering the basics. So with regards to your bedroom environment, making sure it's dark because we sleep best in a dark room. Making sure it's cool because we sleep better in a cool room. Making sure it's quiet because noise, again, disturbs sleep. And making sure it's comfortable, that you've got a big sort of comfortable bed that sort of doesn't transmit movement but does sort of wicks heat away, that sort of thing. Those are all basics. Ensuring that your caffeine intake is relatively sort of is minimal. Sort of have a perhaps in the morning, but then knocking it on the head by midday. Again, alcohol we haven't discussed, but it disturbs sleep at night. If you drink it to excess. So if you have a glass of wine with a meal, I would say it should be out of your, at say 7, it will be out of your system by sort of 9:30. And so it shouldn't be disturbing your sleep. If you're drinking a bottle, then it will disturb you. As it's been metabolized, it fragments your sleep and wakes us up early. Exercise for health and enjoyment rather than this is going to get me to sleep. So it's all it's all obvious stuff. But what we do at the sleep school, which really sort of sets us apart, is to teach people how to stop struggling with sleep. It's when we can't sleep, we struggle to try and get it. And unfortunately, it's like an endless game of tug of war. The more you pull, the more it pulls back. And so everything we do is natural. It's about not taking pills, potions, rules, and rituals. It's about letting go of that, all of the techniques that sit on your bedside sort of table, where you sort of need to listen to the radio, or I need to take this pill. Learning ways in which to sort of let those go. And one of the key in which we teach or we use is mindfulness, which is an awareness of the present moment. Being able to notice what is going on right now, because often our mind is constantly in the past, thinking about everything that's gone on, or it's in the future, imagining what's going to happen. And when it comes to sleeplessness, it's worrying about how little sleep we've had, or imagining how bad things will be tomorrow if we don't sleep. And so being able to ground yourself in the moment at night, perhaps noticing the duvet on your toes, or the pillow on your face, or the mattress on your, enough just to bring you back into now. But then a crucial part about what we do is welcoming often our fears, because what we tend to do with anxiety or other strong emotions or strong or unwanted thoughts, such as if I don't sleep, I won't be able to cope, we battle against them, we try to get rid of them, but that makes them bigger and stronger. So we use powerful, welcoming techniques that actually change the way you relate to them rather than putting all your energy into trying to change them. And so you learn to see them differently and again, let them go. But then one of the crucial things that I believe and we teach at the sleep school is getting people to truly live a valued life, because we know that a happy and content brain is a sleepy brain. And what happens when we have insomnia is through our desperation to try and control it. We might say, well, I won't sleep with my partner because that could disturb my sleep. Or I won't go out with the girls because that could disturb my sleep. Or I won't share a bed with my partner because that could disturb my sleep. And whilst it seems to make sense, these things are actually done out of fear. And the only thing that fear of sleep is in, fear of sort of insomnia is increasing. And so learning how to live your life breeds contentment and happiness, which breeds sleep. So all of that information can be found in my book, The Sleep Book, and we also an app out that people might be interested in, which is called the Sleep School app, which just playfully teaches animations, all of that information and how to get truly great sleep.
So is your book likely to keep people awake at night, or is it going to send me off to sleep?
Well, I did have someone get in contact rather playfully over Twitter a few days ago saying she just attended our workshop and said, spent all last night awake, ... reading your book. Loved it. So obviously, I ask people to read the book during the day and to not use it during night. And the same with our app as well. We actually have a little device on the app which basically says it's past your bedtime. Are you sure you want to be using this? Because we don't want people up using it. It's a therapeutic coaching app. It's not designed to it's not sort of teaching people how to. It's not lulling people into sleep. It's about training their brain how to sleep.
Perfect. So, Guy, how do people get in contact with you about the Sleep School?
The easiest way to get in contact is to visit our website, which is www.thesleepschool.org. And you can just see all of the things that we do. You can email myself, which is guy@thesleepschool.org. Or you can follow me on Twitter, which is Dr. Guy Meadows, or our Facebook page, so there are plenty of ways, and please do get in touch.
It's been great to talk to you today. I've learned some fascinating things about sleep that I actually didn't know myself. So it's been my absolute pleasure to have you on Food for Thought.
Thank you very much. It's been a pleasure.